At just 20 years old, Mike Tyson wasn't supposed to be here yet. But after destroying Marvis Frazier in seconds, the boxing world had a terrifying question. Who could actually stop him? Then Tyson stepped into the ring with reigning champion Trevor Berbick, and everything changed. Because what happened next didn't just make Tyson a champion, it made him a legend.
So the first fight I ever called on TV was Mike Tyson versus Jesse Ferguson in Glens Falls, New York. And this is the famous drive his nose bone into his brain.
What else do he know? If he trying to hit you, like he gonna be trying to kill you. That's all he know. I get in front of him and I see him doing all this. I say, oh, I'm gonna kill that. I start throwing punches, he slipped all of them. Wait a minute. I was worried. I was too. Listen, y'all can't be out there trying to kill each other. What else do he know? If he trying to hit you, like he gonna be trying to kill you. That's all he know.
At 20 years old, most fighters are still trying to prove they deserve a place in the room. This kid stepped in and made everyone wonder if they had been watching the next superstar all along. But Tyson didn't just win. He shattered the line between prospect and champion, forcing boxing to face one frightening question. Who was going to stop him?
One kid, it's so funny, but I never forget it. A kid, he was a young kid, a young fighter too. And he was running, and he walked, he saw me, looked at me, and he said...
By the summer of 1986, Mike Tyson was no longer an unknown prospect, but one question still remained. Everyone knew he was dangerous. Everyone knew the power was real. But being a frightening prospect and becoming a legitimate heavyweight threat were two completely different things.
I was a young kid then. I'm 43 years old, right? You're still dwelling on something I said at 20 years old, or 21 years old, or 19 years old. I'm 43. What do you want to get from this interview?
I want to see how much
you've
changed.
And I'm standing on the other side of the ring, listening to this, headset on, and I thought to myself, oh my God, look at what I've stumbled into here. This kid is not only going to be the biggest attraction in boxing, he's going to be the biggest attraction in America.
And Marvis Frazier was expected to help answer that question. Frazier was hardly some random opponent pulled off the street. He was the son of legendary heavyweight champion Joe Frazier, and more importantly, he had already competed for the world heavyweight title. He possessed experience, pedigree, and the kind of reputation that could show the boxing world whether Tyson was truly ready for the biggest stage. Instead, the fight lasted roughly 30 seconds.
One of my favorite TV fights was him versus Marvis Frazier, because it was such a terrifying execution.
I'm talking about Mike Tyson. At least bringing up his name.
Who?
You know. The guy with whom you had your last fight. In your prime, could you have beaten him?
Everybody in this room here would have been able to beat Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson was born right.
Really?
Yeah. You'd have never heard of him.
Joe's sitting over there nodding his head like I ain't sure about that.
Yeah, everybody.
From the opening bell, Tyson surged forward with the kind of explosive aggression that made his opponents look like they had somehow wandered into traffic. Frazier barely had a chance to find his rhythm before Tyson closed the gap, unleashed a brutal combination, and sent him crashing onto the canvas. The referee halted the contest in the first round. That was it. No lengthy heavyweight war. No dramatic comeback. No chance for Frazier to test Tyson's stamina or boxing skills.
We got a Mike Tyson training session from when he was 20 years old. Bro was built like this at 20 years old. Look how quick he was. One thing about Mike, his defense was crazy. We already know he was knocking everybody out, but look at how fast he was to be that big.
How hard you gotta be hit to rock back and forth like this, bro. Like, this dude had no soul in half of his body, bro. Boy, this man got hit so hard, this dude did the cat.
Tyson had basically taken one of the biggest challenges of his young career and transformed it into a highlight reel before most fans had even settled into their seats. And that was when the entire conversation changed. Because knocking out an opponent is one thing. Knocking out a former world title challenger in roughly 30 seconds is something completely different. Suddenly, Tyson's terrifying reputation was no longer built solely on hype, gym stories, or what people believed he could eventually become. Now, there was proof. But here's where things get interesting. A knockout that fast can actually raise more questions than it answers. Critics could still argue that Frazier simply got caught. They could claim Tyson was explosive, but perhaps the performance ended too quickly to show what happened when things became difficult. So Tyson faced another challenge. He needed to prove that destroying Marvis Frazier was not simply a one-night fluke, and luckily for him, he would not have to wait long for another opportunity to answer that question. The Frazier fight was impressive, but what made that moment so important was everything surrounding it. because Tyson was only 20 years old and was already being placed in situations that could determine whether his extraordinary potential was truly translating into championship-level ability.
And so all the way up to Albany for the Marvis Frazier fight, Alex is saying to me, you know, I'm thinking of saying in the opening on camera that Mike will knock him out in the first round. Do you think that's too audacious? And I said, well, Alex, you're the expert. You know, I'm just a throw-in blow-by-blow guy who's trying to get my feet wet here. I'm the last person who's going to tell you what it is you should say. So if you believe Mike is going to knock him out in the first round and you're confident saying that, first of all, no one's going to penalize you on Monday if you're wrong.
At that age, most heavyweight prospects are still being carefully developed. Trainers are focused on building experience without damaging a young fighter's confidence. Promoters are generally protecting their investment, and opponents are often chosen with one eye on competition and the other on survival. You do not normally put a 20-year-old heavyweight inside the ring with someone carrying Marvis Frazier's pedigree unless you genuinely believe that young fighter is prepared for something serious. Tyson did not simply survive that test, though. He destroyed it. Marvis Frazier entered the fight carrying one of boxing's most recognizable surnames, but his reputation was not based simply on being Joe Frazier's son. This was supposed to be one of those fights where Tyson had to prove that raw power alone would not be enough. Frazier was expected to bring composure, experience, and enough time to actually use those advantages. Once Tyson found his opening, however, everything unfolded with incredible speed. He landed the combination that dropped Frazier, and suddenly the man who was supposed to provide a serious examination for the young heavyweight was left trying to understand how the entire fight had fallen apart so quickly.
I think that the young man has something that, we all had ourselves. It's just the idea that he's there and he's doing the job, he's sacrificed, and, he's a marksman. If you look at this young man, when he throw punches, he just don't throw punches for the heck of it. It was a cause and a reason, and believe it or not, he's right on top.
So this is Frazier's son, right, fighting? Why in the hell is Frazier's son fighting Mike Tyson when his dad fought Mike Tyson? Like, his dad should have told. No. Okay, my homeboy told me the story. He said Frazier's dad fought Mike Tyson, and then all of a sudden he was like, yeah, my son he can battle with you too. That ain't right. That's child abuse.
That is what makes the performance so fascinating when you look beyond the knockout itself. Tyson was not simply rushing forward and throwing punches as hard as possible, hoping something would eventually connect. There was a method behind the violence. His pressure was designed to stop his opponent from establishing a comfortable rhythm, and once Tyson got inside, his compact movement and explosive combinations made it incredibly difficult for Frazier to create the space he needed to respond. The fight ended in roughly 30 seconds. That momentum became something much more significant because the performance created the kind of fear that can change how an entire division views a fighter. Suddenly, opponents were not simply preparing to face a promising young heavyweight who might be dangerous. They were preparing for someone capable of making them uncomfortable before they even settled into the fight. When an opponent possesses the ability to generate that kind of destruction almost immediately, every exchange carries greater risk because there is no guarantee that a fighter will have enough time to recover from even the smallest mistake.
One of my favorite TV fights was him versus Marvis Frazier, because it was such a terrifying execution.
I'm giving away too much of the book, Joe. I mean, my publisher would say, wait, don't tell them the whole book.
Come on, people are going to buy it anyway. Don't worry about that.
So
don't ever listen
Alex
to publishers.
Alex Wallow and I lived 5 blocks
Tyson
apart.
was especially terrifying because he never needed multiple rounds to work toward his biggest moment. His most dangerous attack could come almost instantly, meaning opponents could never assume they had enough time to settle comfortably into the fight. Tyson was not fighting like someone who was merely hoping to become champion someday. He was fighting like someone who already believed he belonged among the very best in the sport. The speed was there, the power was undeniable, and the aggression was becoming harder and harder to overlook. More importantly, Tyson was beginning to display a confidence that showed he was not intimidated by the quality of opposition standing across from him. The Frazier fight also revealed why his style was so difficult to handle. Heavyweights have always recognized the value of power, but power alone does not explain what remarkably good at recognizing the opening and refusing to give that opponent enough time to recover. That instinct is extremely difficult to teach. For fans watching at the time, that had to be unsettling because the question was no longer whether Tyson could knock opponents out. Everyone already knew he possessed terrifying power.
Could Tyson have survived and even thrived in that earlier era?
I ain't knocking Mike Tyson. No. Joe Frazier would beat him up in his own style. Joe liked guys like that. Ali, slap him all day long with the jab. Kenny Norton, too strong.
George Foreman?
2 seconds. You can't stay there with George Foreman and take no punches. George will tear your head off. It's like the kitchen sink he's hitting you with.
The bigger question was what would happen when somebody finally managed to withstand the opening storm. That remained the mystery, and now everyone had witnessed it. The question was no longer whether this kid could become something special. The more urgent question was how long anyone could stop him from becoming exactly that. Marvis Frazier had entered the ring as a serious challenge for a promising young heavyweight, but he left the fight having unintentionally become something even more valuable to Tyson's career. Proof. His defeat provided proof that Mike Tyson was not simply another prospect surrounded by hype and inflated expectations. He was becoming the kind of fighter capable of turning a supposedly competitive matchup into an emergency before the audience had even finished settling into their seats. That was the truly terrifying part. The Frazier fight had revealed what Tyson could do to a respected contender, but there was still one question hanging over the young fighter. Could he do it against the man who actually held the heavyweight championship? That question would soon receive an answer, and when it came, it would transform Tyson's reputation from frightening prospect into something much bigger already.
Capable and confident of my capabilities, and I'm sure of becoming the youngest heavyweight champion in history.
Mike, we heard what Trevor had to say about you. What do you have to say about him? After all, he is the champ. Is he the best you've seen so far?
Well, on paper, I guess he is, but if he happens to get knocked out in 1 or 2 rounds, then what can we say?
I want to, you know, Mike, for every great athlete, if you're on a roll, somebody's going to try and knock you. People said when you were knocking out all those guys who went in 2 rounds, well, he can't go the distance. Then you had a couple of fights where you went the distance. Do you get fed up with the fans and media that always try and find something wrong with you?
No, not at all, because every great athlete and entertainer in general have to, pay.
But if the Marvis Frazier fight was when people first started paying attention, the Trevor Berbick fight was when they had no choice but to believe it. Because there is a huge difference between destroying a respected contender and destroying a reigning world champion. Frazier had been dangerous. He had experience. He had pedigree. But Trevor Berbick possessed something Tyson had not yet taken from anyone else: a world title. And on November 22nd, 1986, Tyson entered the ring knowing that if he could defeat Berbick, he would not simply walk away with another impressive victory. He would walk away as the compete consistently at the highest level. Tyson, however, was already standing across the ring from the reigning WBC heavyweight champion with the opportunity to take control of the division. Suddenly, all the questions surrounding him after the Marvis Frazier fight had reached a much bigger stage. Could this young destroyer handle the pressure of a world championship fight? Could his incredible speed remain effective against a seasoned champion? Could his relentless aggression survive against an opponent experienced enough to make adjustments? Most importantly, was Mike Tyson truly ready to become the heavyweight champion of the world?
November 22nd at the Hilton Hotel, he is taking a shot, as you may or may not know, at the WBC heavyweight boxing title on November 22nd against Trevor Berbick in Las Vegas at the Hilton. As I just said, a lot of people have called him the best puncher to come along in 20 years. He's here, and let me show you why. There are a few reasons why they think he may just win that match.
So you can see that Trevor Berbick's he's 6'2", and Mike is 5'11", so he's much shorter. But for a fighter like Mike, this is just not an issue at all. You know, Mike is known for being like quite the bull in the ring, and he loves staying in the pocket and just throwing really hard hits. So
Doctor cannot stop the fight. We'll be back with round 1 in a moment.
This is the main event of the night. 12
Mike
rounds
Tyson
of
in his
boxing
20s,
for the
November 22.
Championship of the world.
Look how young he looks.
Trevor Berbick was about to reveal the answer. Berbick was not stepping into the ring as some ceremonial opponent whose only job was to make Tyson look impressive. He was the reigning champion, and he had already survived the kind of battles that teach a heavyweight lessons that simply cannot be learned inside a gym. He understood how to manage pressure, he knew what championship rounds demanded, and he understood what it meant to face a truly dangerous puncher. More importantly, Berbick possessed something Tyson had never experienced at this level, the heavyweight championship itself. That belt represented experience, credibility, and everything Tyson was now determined to take from him. So when the opening bell sounded, the fight was no longer merely about proving Tyson had talent. Tyson moved with an urgency that seemed almost unnatural for a heavyweight, but he was constantly reacting to what his opponent was doing, meaning he was no longer controlling the fight. Tyson demanded that control from the opening moments, and he was determined to force Berbick to fight at a pace that suited him instead of the champion.
They said there's a young heavyweight in the Catskills called Mike Tyson. I'd never heard of Mike. I didn't know who he was. He was knocking men out left, right and centre. This 17-year-old phenomenon was just incredible. But I didn't know this. I was just happy to hear 17. I'd left school when I was 14 years of age. I was on the doors of nightclubs at 15. I was big for my age, but I hadn't got that man strength. And I didn't do good in school. I left school with 2 swimming certificates.
Left hand by Tyson, and a right behind it, and Berbick is rocked. Berbick in trouble here.
Berbick tried to establish himself, but Tyson's pressure repeatedly pushed him backward. The young challenger was not allowing the champion the comfort of standing in the center of the ring, taking his time, and choosing when and where the exchanges would happen. Instead, Tyson was slowly turning the fight into exactly the kind of contest he wanted, one built around speed, close-range pressure, explosive combinations, and constant danger. This was where the earlier victory over Marvis Frazier suddenly became far more meaningful, against Frazier, world champion. That was the difference. A single spectacular, the same fighter steps into a championship fight and immediately imposes his style on the reigning champion. Tyson was making those excuses disappear one by one. Berbick could not simply stand before him and trade punches without consequences. Every exchange carried danger because Tyson combined unusual heavyweight speed with devastating power, meaning the champion had to account for several threats at once.
Fight from 1986, Mike Tyson versus Trevor Berbick. We all know who Mike Tyson is. Trevor Berbick is the former WBC champion, which is the World Boxing Council. It's a international boxing league. And yeah, he was actually the last one to defeat Muhammad Ali by unanimous decision. And here we have Mike Tyson in his absolute beginning stages of his career. He's just at 20 years old at this point. And yeah, this is a really awesome fight.
If Berbick prepared for the power, he still had to contend with the speed. If he concentrated on the speed, he still had to deal with the pressure. If he attempted to retreat, Tyson possessed the movement and aggression to hunt him down, while choosing to stand his ground meant willingly entering range against a fighter who looked completely comfortable operating at close quarters. The pressure continued, and then came the second knockdown. This became the image that would remain etched in boxing history. Berbick attempted to rise to his feet, but his legs seemed to have developed their own disagreement with the rest of his body. He struggled to recover his balance, and for several seconds, the scene became almost surreal, because this was not some inexperienced fighter being overwhelmed by a young prospect.
2 weeks from Saturday, another step in the unification of the heavyweight title picture when WBC heavyweight champion Trevor Berbick takes on unbeaten Mike Tyson. Now, Tyson, of course, has a chance to be the youngest heavyweight champion ever. He is unbeaten with knockout after knockout. In fact, Tyson, the challenger, will be the favorite. Berbick respects his younger opponent, but at a news conference today in Las Vegas, well, he was still very, very confident that his experience will win out in the end.
This was the reigning heavyweight champion of the world, struggling to convince his own legs that they were still strong enough to keep him standing. The referee watched closely as Berbick tried to regain his balance, but the damage was unmistakable. The fight was stopped, and in that moment, Mike Tyson became the youngest heavyweight world champion in boxing history. That record remains untouched, and that is what makes the moment so extraordinary. Boxing has spent decades producing younger champions, developing championship. He dominated the reigning champion with the same qualities that had already made him such a frightening prospect: speed, pressure, power, and an intensity that seemed almost completely extraordinary for his age. But something even greater was unfolding that night. The boxing world was witnessing the birth of a superstar in real time. Before Berbick, Tyson was the terrifying young contender everyone was starting to discuss. After Berbick, he was the heavyweight champion of the world, and that achievement changed everything. A contender can be exciting, but a champion becomes a target.